All right, welcome in everyone, family, friends, community, and perhaps a few foes as well. Thank you for joining me for another installment of Bible Study with the Next Pastor. This series has become a lot more popular than I thought it would. And basically, these are not deep theological discussions. This is more so of like a sneak peek into my worldview and my evolving worldview over the years. So, what I typically share while we're going through the Bible is what I thought about this when I was younger, what I thought about this when I was active in ministry and then closer to the fringes of the faith, and perhaps a little bit of insight of what I think about these things now. These sessions have been just as revealing for me as I've seen that it has been for you all as well. All right, so before we jump in, let's take care of a few things. If you haven't already, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and then share this. All right, let's get this stuff out there to as many people as possible. The more people who see us having these conversations, the more people who see us sharing our deconversion and our deconstruction, the more people who see us living and loving and vibrant community and having a great time, the more people who will feel comfortable leaving the shackles of superstition. So make sure to like, subscribe, and share so we can really get that word out. And then also, if you are really loving this content and you'd like to be a part of making this content happen, and you'd like to be a part of the community that's growing behind this content, consider joining us on Patreon. The link is in the description. All right, so let's jump into this. We've been in the book of Genesis, and I did get this. Someone finally commented. I was waiting for someone to comment on whether y'all wanted the screens or not the screens, and someone said share the screen. And so, for this video, my intent will be to share the screen the entire time. And again, my intent will be to share the link as well. Um, I may forget. I am human, and quite honestly, I'm doing this by myself, guys. And then I also still have like a full-time job, like, and it's I'm a project manager. It's not a light load. And I also handle the DEI stuff at our company as well. So it's a pretty heavy workload. And I'm not saying that to complain. I love doing this. I'm just saying if I forget to do anything that I just said I'd do, please don't charge it to me too bad. Okay. All right. So we left off. We finished up Genesis chapter 6 last time. We all came together. And so we're going to pick up in Genesis chapter 7 today. And for those of you who don't know, we're using the New American Standard Bible and this website that I am on that I'm using to read through it. And I like this website because it has a bunch of tools and things of that nature. So it's blueletterbible.org. And so for anybody who has a sincere interest in studying this particular book as literature and just to critically analyze it, this is a great tool, a great beginner tool to use, I'd say. And it gives you access to a lot of other things as well, such as commentaries, concordances, and all that jazz. So, and I'd also like to say, like, if we were to ever do these sessions live, like, I feel like I'd want them to be at a bar. I'd want it to be at a bar somewhere. It doesn't have to be at a bar, but it needs to be somewhere where we can have a drink, and maybe some other stuff. Okay, so I'll get into this. All right, so Genesis chapter 7, verse 1. This is a very familiar story, so we're just going to kind of scroll through. Let me get my mouse ready over here. Yeah. Then the Lord said to Noah, enter the ark, you and all your household, for you alone I have seen to be righteous before me in this generation. So in this generation, and of course we know, or we do have, or at least I did, have an understanding that the word generation was more expansive than the way we typically use it. So, or at least that was the presupposition that I had, was that generation here just meant everybody, as opposed to Generation X, Generation Y, and all that good stuff. Generation just meant everybody. So he says, out of everybody on the whole damn planet, you alone, you alone have I seen to be righteous before me. That's like being a car manufacturer and saying, like we made 50,000 cars, and out of those 50,000, only one of them worked right. That says more about you than it does the cars, But anyway, so you shall take with you 7 pairs of every clean animal, a male and his female, a male and his female. Look at that ownership. That is interesting. You shall take with you 7 pairs of every clean animal, a male and his female, and 2 of the animals that are not clean, a male and his female. Like, wow, I don't think I saw that earlier. I don't think that ever even stood out to me as odd. I don't think it ever stood out to me as peculiar or strange or anything. But now reading it, it's like glaringly, oh snap! So, because I think that's my first time actually thinking like, oh, so God is expecting this kind of dominance of male over female to be persistent even in the animal kingdom, which you'll often find that's not the case. It is literally a social construct, but okay, we'll talk about that at a later time, especially when we get to the New Testament. That's when that becomes really relevant. But okay, so also of the birds of the sky, 7 pairs, male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For after 7 more days, I'll send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And I will wipe out from the face of the land every living thing that I have made. Such a nice guy. Such a nice guy. Um, Now, as a child, again, and I'm just being completely transparent here. I don't even think as a pastor, if I would have said this stuff out loud, people probably would have been upset with me. But I just hated these stories as a kid. I think this is one of the reasons why I may have become a preacher, because I felt like everybody was doing it wrong. Like I hated the Sunday school lessons that they often, did. But I did not enjoy reading this. I did not enjoy learning from this. I have preached from this maybe once or twice, but I didn't find much of value in this story. I didn't find much of value as a younger person or as a pastor in much of early Genesis narratives, until we get to about Abraham. There's nothing really preach worthy in a relevant society. And even then, the stuff that you get after that to make it preach worthy, you really have to twist it and ignore so much of the context in order to make this something even worthy to be preached from. It's not that you can't preach it. It's like it's the things that we've preached from, especially in the Black church. It's probably not the stories we've turned into good stories. That's probably not a good skill to have. You know. So yeah, he's gonna wipe out everything that he's made, and for me, even now, like I have a problem with the idea of creation, like this idea. Now, this might rub some of you the wrong way, but and it's not just creation as creationism. I would not dare say creation science. No such thing exists. But no, let me stop. But no, like it's not just creation, as in creating the earth or creating man or creating animals and things of that nature. I have an issue with the word create, period, because this is just not something I've ever seen. So even when we, as content creators, we say we create. As an artist, as a musician, I say I create, but in all actuality, that's not really what I do. And I think this illusion, and this has nothing to do with my theological thing. Well, actually does. It does run into that, but it actually comes from my days in music, where I would, artists would constantly say, "Oh, I got to get away from everybody else. I don't want to listen to anything else, because if I listen to anything else, it's going to impact my music, and I want my creation to be pure." I want, and I'm just like, "Oh, poor soul! Like that's not how anything in this world works. Evolution itself is a generative process. We are, according to my perspective, and someone please feel free to show me how I may be thinking about this wrong. But according to my perspective, we are generative creatures. Our whole processing with life is generative. There's no real new thoughts. We're just taking thoughts and then generating ideas around those thoughts. Everything that we have made was something that was ultimately made of other things. Now we're pressing that boundary in a lot of ways, but I find it overwhelmingly unhelpful to put this pressure on yourself to create when in all actuality all you really need to do is just generate, and that's something you're doing anyway. But then when you try to make it create, you're making something come out of nothing, and it's like, well, you've never seen any evidence of anything like that, so that's not something you need to try. All art is a reflection of a person's experience. We are all generating our whole existence, and I don't mean this in any type of spooky way, but I mean our whole existence is generated by our experiences and by our understanding of those experiences. And so this for me, because Genesis 1, Genesis 2, okay, you made these animals, you made these birds, but you didn't make Cain. You didn't make Seth. You didn't make Abel. You didn't make Noah. As a matter of fact, you gave us that genealogy. And so, that word for me is just a little weird. Every living thing that I have made, like, it's more like you're killing the children of all the things that you've made. But, again, if it's your game, you know, if it's your assimilation, maybe you see them all as the same. So Noah acted in accordance with everything that the Lord had commanded him. He did. And now Noah was 600 years old when the flood of the water came upon the earth. Then Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him entered the ark because of the waters of the flood, of clean animals and animals that are not clean, and birds and everything that crawls on the ground. Yeah, I kind of remember why I didn't like this as a child. It's very redundant. It's just so inefficient, of clean animals. They all went into the ark to Noah by twos, male and female, as God had commanded Noah. Now it came about after the 7 days that the waters of the flood came upon the earth, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the seventh day of the month. On that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were open. And that's interesting to me. I do know as a child that part there, just about the fountains of the great deep. I used to be into stuff like Pirates of Dark Water as a kid, and I was definitely into like mermaid legends and things of that nature. And so, I'd be interested, like, what's the fountains of the great deep burst open? What's happening there? Where are these fountains, and where are they bursting from? And the floodgates of the skies were open. And I've heard a lot of different people talk about this. Now, again, I was a different type of believer. I didn't, even when people had these conversations, I didn't put much stock into them. So, some people will share some of their ideas, from in the comments and things of that nature. But I do want everyone to know very clearly about me that I don't consider any of this to be anywhere near true, or to be a reflection of anything that is true. More so, I consider this to all be stuff, even if it was written with the best intentions ever, to be all things written by people who could not have possibly known, and people who really did not know any better. That's probably about the clearest way I can say it. So when people come to me and say, no, what this actually means is this, I'm like, get out of here, man. The people who wrote it don't even know what it actually means. And so it's if you're gonna roll with me in these conversations, you got to know that I'm treating this like fan fiction, and that's just because I've seen way too many people take way too many liberties with it, and while taking those liberties, still claim that no, I know this to be true for certain, or no, this is the. Do you know how many people say no, this is the right interpretation? This is the actual interpretation. And all of them are ignoring the other person who's using the exact same language to describe their interpretation. I'm not ignoring that. I'm paying attention to that. And I'm saying, hey, none of y'all know. It's like you're both wrong and you're all wrong, because ultimately, when you look at literature that is this old, it's in the realm of the humanities at this moment. It's the arts. It's arts. And so we're all going to get something from it. So at any moment, at any moment you try to take your interpretation and impose it on anybody else as truth, you're being superstitious, and you should not do that. Don't do that. Okay, so yeah, so I was not I was just like this language wasn't descriptive enough. It's like, yes, something is happening here, but like what? It's like, okay, there are floodgates in the sky. And I did used to love that song, Open the Floodgates of Heaven. Oh, and everybody should know it because it was done and well, I say everybody, but not everybody, but a good bit of you should know it. Some of you will know the Michael W. Smith version. I'm not going to sing it. And then some of you will know the Paul Morton's version, who I often like to call affectionately Bishop Milk Dud. Just seems to work there. I'm bald, so I can do that. I can talk about other bald people. Um, those are the rules. But yeah, the great deep burst open. I have no clue what that means. And the floodgates of the sky were open, and I have no clue what that means, nor do I know how this is different from the mist rising up from the ground. So rain does different things in the book of Genesis. It's very, very fascinating. On this very same day, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah and Noah's wife, and the three wives of his son with them entered the ark. They and every animal according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kind, and every crawling thing that crawls on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind. Do you see how redundant this is? How repetitive it is? What? Why did you have to write it this way? Yikes. Okay. All sorts of birds. So they went into the ark by twos of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. So they went into the ark to Noah by twos of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. All right, so I don't know if D's gonna see this, but D Murphy mentioned on our recent Here We Grow Atheist subscribers celebration party. By the way, if you haven't watched it, go watch it and then like it and then subscribe if you haven't done that, and then share it because it's freaking awesome. Like the community there was just amazing. Yeah, even like go through the live chats. But Dee mentioned that one of the things that really bothered her about this idea of heaven is one time hearing John MacArthur say that, you know, animals weren't going to heaven because they didn't have a soul. And I definitely heard that idea propagated quite a lot, especially in Pentecostal circles, but I think in other circles as well. It's just this idea that animals don't have a soul. And my wife and I have talked about this frequently, where I constantly remind people that a lot of beliefs that Christians have, they don't actually get from the Bible, right? And mind you, most people who believe the Bible is true do not believe the Bible is true because they have evidence that it's true. They don't believe that it's true because they actually tested something in it and saw that it was true. That is the language that they'll use. But I am of the mind that most people who are superstitious, if you believe something without evidence, your definition of evidence is already corrupted. So yes, you will say, oh, the Bible is true because I opened it one day and I was feeling bad and it made me feel good. That's not how evidence works. But no, so John MacArthur said that animals do not have a soul. And it's just very interesting to me because right here in Genesis chapter 7, verse 15, by twos of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. I don't know if y'all can see that highlight. I think you can. In which there was the breath of life. So they went into the ark to Noah by twos of all flesh, in which there was. So all the flesh that was on Noah's boat had the breath of life. This is the same breath of life that humans have. So where is the delineation? Where is the scriptural qualifier that actually separates man's becoming a living soul experience from animals? According to this author of Genesis chapter 7, there is no difference, that animals are made by the same breath of life. That was just interesting to me, that I don't that is yet another belief where a really, really famous Christian got up and said something matter-of-factly, which not only do we all know he would have had no scientific evidence for, but it didn't even require any biblical evidence for. That's That's the state of the church. The state of the church is anybody can say anything and it will be true. I mean, that's even how you get a charismatic movement. And I'm not just talking about the speaking in tongues and the dancing and the running around and all that stuff. I'm down for a good time every now and then myself. But there are some of these people who have gone so far as to hallucinate gold dust falling out of the freaking sky during the service. So, yeah, okay, I'm coming back. But the majority of the Christian experience has no place in, gets no license from Scripture itself, and even for the things that we do, you have to pull it a long way. All right. So, and we'll talk about this some more. So, verse 16, those that entered, male and female of all flesh, entered as God had commanded him, and the Lord closed the door behind him. Now, that right there. As a child, that bothered me. The Lord closed the door behind me. I had to make the fucking boat, but you get to close the door. What? Like, if you could do something, you're okay. Mind you, the text so far, let's be clear. The text so far has not cited this God as all powerful. The text so far has not cited this character as all knowing. The text so far has not cited this character as all seeing or as all present, you know. But I am wondering, like, you can create the universe, but you couldn't build a boat, but you could close the door of the boat. Like, and when you think about it that way, you picked Noah to survive according to the text, and that's what we're doing. According to the text, Noah was picked to survive and to get this warning because he was righteous, because he was blameless. And so you take the guy who is blameless and then you condemn him to building a freaking boat to save his life when you could have provided a boat. You could have turned a mountain into a boat. You literally could have lifted him up. Now, I don't know if you could have. I don't know if this character could have, but my mind is replete with like examples of things that could have happened here, other than just saying, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to flood everything. I'm going to destroy everything. If you don't want to be destroyed, you need to build a boat. But by the way, closing the door on this impossibly big boat is going to be too impossible of a task for you. Closing the door on the boat is going to be an impossible task for you. But you and your sons building the boat, not going to be impossible at all. But closing the door is too hard for you. I'll handle that part. Yikes. Like, okay, maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. But definitely as a kid, that did bother me, because even with the idea of the flood and things of that nature, my mind was more so like, okay, I could still kind of say like these are people explaining that a flood came. Me personally, I didn't believe that God was actually behind the flood. Even when I believed that there was a global flood, I did not believe that God was behind the flood. I believe that whoever came up with this story believed that God was behind the flood, because that's typically how mythology works, right? So, and it's funny how I was able to have that cognitive dissonance there, and so in my mind, it's like, no, God didn't cause the flood. This is our ways as we're learning about God. I understood the Bible is an old book, so there's going to be old things in here. There's going to be old mindsets in here, and so it was only when I started hanging out with other Christians and other preachers and realizing that, like, oh no, you look at this as literally the word of God, and that I got very uncomfortable using that phrasing in my latter years as a pastor. But no, so this, maybe this part made sense to you, but it did not make sense to me. And just the fact that the Lord is physically interacting, that was problematic for me, because prior to this part, yes, while the Lord is doing a lot of physical things, the majority of those physical things are the personification of nature, or this anthropomorphic type of, the Lord walks with me in the cool of the day, but it's like no footsteps type of bullshit, And so, but but now you got the Lord physically closing the door of the boat. That was problematic for me. Now, if you would have said, "And the Lord calls the waters to close the door on the boat," I would have been like, "Okay, that tracks with the story." The Lord closing the door on the boat, I feel like somebody overplayed their hand there. Like you jumped the shark with that one. Maybe, yeah, I don't know. And that's just me, but I do have some pretty interesting thoughts on that idea of a God physically interacting with things. And that was actually a major branch of theological movements, especially within the charismatic word of faith type of kingdom theology, redemption theology. That was a common thread, that God actually does not do anything in the earth. As a matter of fact, that God does nothing in the earth without revealing his plans to his prophets. I remember at one point people were saying things along the lines of that God does nothing in the earth without a man. But that's even kind of that is the imagery of the New Testament, and it's the imagery of children of Israel as well at certain points, at least according to Isaiah's perspective, that Israel isn't just the bride of Christ, or the bride of God, in the same way that the church is not just the bride of Christ, but you are the agency of that deity in the earth. Um, Otherwise you would not need a Moses if there was this powerful God who intervenes. You would not need a David if there's this powerful God who intervenes. You would not need a covenant people if there was a powerful God who intervenes. And so and I was very much a part of this type of theology, even though this isn't the articulation, or this isn't the language that we articulated it with. This is exactly what was being communicated, and it was pretty much what I believed. Now, if somebody would have said that to me, I would have been like, no, I believe God intervenes, but you would have been hard pressed to get me to admit that what I was saying is that, oh, so you're more of a deist. But no, but when that's still not quite a deist, because we believe that God intervened through the Spirit, but even the Spirit was still just this. It's like a moniker for your own consciousness, because when your consciousness is doing good things, it's the Holy Spirit, and when your consciousness is doing bad things, it's either the devil or just you. Um, but no, so there was definitely that ideology. As a preacher who lived in the real world, it was more appetizing to me that God, oh, this makes sense why God is not absent, or why God is not active. God is not active because we're supposed to be active. If there was a song years ago by a group called Big Daddy Weave, which was out of Ozark, Alabama, by the way, but they were Christian band, and they had a song, "If we are the body, why aren't his hands healing? Why aren't his feet doing something?" But that's ultimately the Christian imagery, that we are the body, we're the agency of God in the earth. I think there's something in Psalms that says that the heavens are the Lord, but the earth but the earth he has given to men and the children of men. And now easily somebody say, but the Bible says the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And I'd just be like, duh, it says both. But that seems to be, I have no problem admitting that the Bible says contradictory things. It's a whole book of contradictions. And I don't say that to pick at it or make it worse than any other book. I mean, have you read the book of the Egyptian Book of the Dead? I have. Contradictions abound, because our understanding then was not where it is now. All right, but so we'll keep going. I think I rabbit trailed there long enough. All right, so the flood came upon the earth for 40 days, and the water increased and lifted up the ark so that it rose above the earth. And so again, just again here, like, this is, even though, yes, we know the idea is that God is destroying the earth. The language is passive. That's why the God actively closing the door was like, what? Because everything else is like, then the flood came, and the waters did this, the fountains of the deep burst open, but the Lord himself, he came down and closed the door. Like, what the fuck? Sorry. Then the flood came. 18, the water prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. And the water prevailed more and more upon the earth, so that all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered. All the high mountains. All the high mountains. That's devastating. It's Waterworld at that moment. The movie. The water prevailed 15 cubits higher, and the mountains were covered. That meant absolutely nothing to me as a child. 15 cubits, don't know what that meant. 23 feet or 6.7 meters higher. Oh, I kind of want. Ooh. Okay, I am a science enthusiast, but I am not academically grounded in my scientific understanding. So I would love for someone to do some math here based on the tallest mountain that we know of, and that would have to be inclusive of any mountains that would have been around this alleged time period. The tallest mountain, and how much higher 23 feet from that would be. At what spot in our atmosphere and our geo situation would that be? I can't think of the words that I'm looking for, but I'd just be interested. Now, I don't know, like it may not be that high, but I think I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about, from ground level to space is actually not that far away, or at least to orbit. Sorry, from ground level to lower Earth orbit is not that far away, and so I'd just be interested in seeing. But anyway, so moving right along, 15 cubits higher. So all creatures that moved on the earth perished: birds, livestock, animals, and every swarming thing that swarms upon the earth. Just that repetitive fucking language, man. Of all that was on the dry land, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life, died. There is that affirmation again that animals indeed do have the spirit of life. So he wiped out every living thing that was upon the face of the land, from mankind to animals to crawling things and the birds of the sky. And they were wiped out from the earth, and only Noah was left together with those that were with him in the ark. The water prevailed upon the earth for 150 days. If I believed that this was true, which I don't, and that was a part of my deconstruction story, is that if I did believe this was true, if I did believe that everything we've read from Genesis chapter 1 to Genesis chapter 7 was in any shape, form, or fashion true, if I believe that, I'd want to assemble the Avengers and take this guy down. This guy is worse. Thanos didn't do us this bad. Thanos left half of us around, and then left it where it was still undoable. You can undo this, but this is a situation where, and I don't know, it just kind of got serious to me there, because I do recognize that people believe this is true. I recognize that there are people who believe that not only that this is true, that this is acceptable, and believe that if this person who did this was real, oh God, they believe, those who believe that this story is true, the majority of them also believe that this dude is coming back, and the next time he's going to destroy the earth with fire. How is that not, dare I say, treasonous? That kind of just makes you an enemy of the earth. If you kind of know that, hey, there's somebody out there who has intentions of destroying our fucking planet, and we're like, come on, let's go. This person is an enemy of earth. So this is mass. I don't know if genocide is heavy enough of a word. What we're witnessing here, if this is true, and of course we know it's not, but the fact that people believe it's true, this You don't have to go very far in the Bible to find why attaching people's belief systems to such things is dangerous. Because yes, if you believe that this God has the right to kill indiscriminately, then you're always going to find a way to rationalize killing indiscriminately. In this case, because this isn't even an act of justice. Even if the attestation was absolutely accurate, that all the other human beings, except for Noah and his family, were just horrible, horrible people. We get absolutely no insight into what any of the animals did wrong. None whatsoever. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. But yeah, so everybody just died, and Noah and his family, and they just and the other little animals, they're literally floating in the graveyard, and this brings some people joy. Yikes. Um, Another thing that was very interesting here, and I don't know, maybe we'll see it in chapter 8. So I'll just go to chapter 8, and then if I don't see it in chapter 8, I'll make mention of that. So, but God remembered Noah and all the animals and all the livestock that were with him in the ark, and God caused the wind to pass over the earth. The water subsided. This is actually why I hated Bible quizzes. In my early days with church, I hated, like the Bible quizzes, Bible challenges, because it would be with questions like this: how long was the waters over the earth? Which animal came back? And I'm like, if we believe that this story is true and that we're supposed to be working in service to this God, how does remembering these minute details in any shape, form, or fashion prepare us to do the work of ministry? And I asked that question like that. I thought about these things seriously. And I posed that question that way because when you do, what you can clearly see is like, oh, yeah, the motivation of the Bible quiz is indoctrination. It's like, well, that becomes everything we're doing in ministry. None of it are we so we try to give religion these passes, and y'all know I'm not anti-religion. I am anti-religion the way it is practiced by most people who practice religion. By the same token, I'm like anti-politics, and by the way that most people practice politics. But okay, now I think I completely forgot where I was going. It was probably going to be a great point, but it's gone. We'll come back later. So, okay, God remembered knowing all the animals and all the livestock. Yeah, but it's indoctrination. That's what it was. You clearly see that the work we do in the ministry, um, everything we do is indoctrination. I had an opportunity to be a part of a conversation earlier about the impact of a discussion of race and religion. Ultimately, is what it was. And while talking about that, one of the many things that we end up discussing is how this has impacted different people, and how different people attach their beliefs to this, and then almost kind of use this to scapegoat themselves. See, there's so many ways I want to go with this, but I got to keep moving. I am going to come back to these thoughts. I am, because I do want to talk about this, about how much, because it's hidden me like never before, about how much of this work is actually indoctrination. One of my moments for deconstruction was realizing that there was something that my church had done that was a really, really good thing, but was actually not beneficial to anybody in any type of way, in any way that could actually measure. Now, once I tell you what we did, you're going to be like, "Oh, that was a great thing to do." We gave gas away. We set up. We raised an amount, and then we put that whole amount and said, "We're going to the first however many people come up to this pump until the money's gone, we're going to put gas in their cars," and we did that. But what I eventually realized after that, like literally that same day after we did it, is that holy crap, we didn't actually do this to help anybody. Because if we did this to help anybody, we would have actually been thinking like, oh, but what are they going to do for gas tomorrow? And it seems like the problem we're tackling here is that people can't afford gas, But I realized we never actually positioned ourselves to solve that problem. Instead, what we did is we positioned ourselves to look like we were solving that problem, to show that we cared, to get more people to show up to the church so that we can indoctrinate them. And then that becomes the whole game. The more people you can indoctrinate, you win. Okay. So literally, like, there are churches who, like, that's the number one conversation. And I'm talking about the sincere ones. I'm not talking about just your money grubbing, sons of bitches, I don't know. But I'm talking about the ones who are sincerely deluded, who have sincerely deluded themselves into believing this. Their number one question every Sunday was how many decisions were made, how many souls were saved. And of course they could never know how many souls were saved. What they're really asking is, for how many people did the indoctrination take this week? And that becomes the measurement of a church's success. And I mean, I want you to think about this. It's not, a church doesn't measure success by how many healthy couples we have. Doesn't measure its success by how many happy families we have. It doesn't measure its success by how many people are doing well economically in our church. It doesn't measure its success by the impact it has actually had on its community in any measurable or tangible way. It only measures its success by how many people it can indoctrinate. That should be alarming. Okay, that rabbit trail went way longer than I wanted it to, but I felt like that was really important to get out. Okay, so verse 2 in chapter 8, we got these fountains of the deep again, and then the floodgates of the sky were closed. Okay, so the fountains of the deep and the floodgates are closed. See, that stuff that did not work for me, because by this time we already knew how rain worked. So, like, we as a species have known how rain worked for a very, very, very long time. When my oldest son was 4 years old, we were sitting down at CC's Pizza having a conversation about condensation on the outside of his glass. So, it was a conversation about condensation and precipitation. My 4-year-old, and I'm not saying that like that's so odd. I mean, that any 4-year-old can grasp those concepts. So it's very odd that we as adults can read this and be like, oh yeah, this is true. How? No, what? All right, so um verse 3, and the water receded steadily from the earth, and at the end of the 150 days the water decreased. Then in the 7th month, on the 7th day of the month, the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. And the water decreased steadily until the 10th month. And the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, the tops of the months. Do you see how that becomes aggravating to read? Then it came about at the end of 40 days. And this is the New American Standard Bible. This isn't even KJV. Then it came about at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he made, and he sent out a raven, and it flew here and there until the water was dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove to see if the waters was low on the surface of the land, but the dove found no resting place for the sole of its foot. So it returned to him in the ark, for the water was on the surface of all the earth. And he put out his hand, and it took it and brought it into the ark to himself. Okay. So the dove couldn't find any resting place. There was a few things that I kind of wanted to hit here, other than the aggravating, useless details. Like, why? That's when you know something is a lie. When you're just giving me extra details that I didn't ask for and that nobody could actually verify. It's like, yeah. So I went around the corner and it was the man out there, and the man had the monkey at that time. But then the monkey, he was chased by the spider. It's like, all right, I just asked where you been. I didn't ask for all of that. The funny thing about this is that, of course, in Christian numerology, we attach the number 4 and the number 40 to tribulation testing, or attached. I say we, like I'm not them anymore. It's old habits, right? But culturally, I guess I was still a part of that, though. Even before I was a believer, I was still culturally a part of that. And you'd be hard pressed to find a Black show from the 90s or even from the 2000s that didn't feature a church service. Like, God dang, it was horrible. But yeah, 40 days, trial, tribulation, all that stuff. Well, 440, 400. There's allegedly, or at least in some circles, there's allegedly a 400-year gap between Malachi and Matthew, often called the 400-year silence, which is actually considered the second 400-year silence in some circles. And I say that because someone is always going to try to correct. And I'm like, you act like there's not 45,000 different versions of this. So let's just not play those games. But yeah, so, and in other circles, that other 400-year gap is between Genesis and Exodus, which we'll kind of get into a little bit of that while we're going through the story. And so the dove is going out looking for stuff. Verse 10, so he waited another 7 days longer. Again, he set out the dove from the ark, and the dove came to him in the evening, and behold, in its beak was a fresh olive leaf. So Noah knew that the water was low on the earth. Okay, so I do want to highlight that a part of this reeks of primordial mythology, which is very interesting because, well, I guess it's not that interesting because Noah is a recreation event, right? So the way I choose to view this particular fan fiction is Genesis 1 is a creation event. Genesis 2 is a recreation event. Genesis 8, 7 through 9 is a recreation event. Now, I do understand that Genesis 1 was actually written after Genesis 2, but it's fan fiction, so I still do it. You know, hey, the Hulk dies sometimes he doesn't. It's fan fiction. So, but what I definitely want to call out here, which I was going to mention at the end of chapter 7, is the author, the writers, and for those of you who are literalists, God's definition of living. Because at the end of chapter 7, God said, "I'm gonna wipe out all living things," and I don't want to take my word for it. Let's go back there. That's why we're sharing the screen. So he wiped out every living thing that was upon the face of the land, from mankind to animals to crawling things and the birds of the sky. They were wiped out from the earth. All right, all living things. We get over here. Dum-dum-dum. Where are we at? Right here. Sent out a raven, he flew here and there, sent out a dove, but the dove found no resting place. So he waited and he sent out, and the dove, okay, here it is. The beak was fresh with an olive leaf. All right. Now, I get that the people of, at the time of this story's crafting and at the time of this story's telling, and then probably even for much of the time of this story being passed along, would not have known this. But for people who claim to look at the Bible and say it's infallible, it's inerrant, all the ways that the Bible gets it wrong, there's so many ways that it gets it wrong that some of the ways are not even as apparent, such as this one, that God never mentions destroying the trees, and that's what I was. That's why I said I'll wait until we get into chapter 8. I did remember about the dove leaf, but I wanted to make sure that there was nothing in between chapter 7 and verse 12 or verse 11 that would have indicated that some time had passed for some things to grow back up, right? Because that could happen. Maybe God said, "I don't need you to take the plants and the seeds on the ark. I don't need you to do any of that, because I'm just going to let them grow back." But there is no grow back period. It's just like the waters recede and then the trees are still here. And as a matter of fact, we're going to use the trees as evidence that the water has receded. And then the tree still has a leaf on it. And it's a fresh leaf, which means it just grew. And that's apparently supposed to be possible and helpful information there. But no, that would definitely mean that God does not consider plants living things, or and of course God's not real, so that's for the literalists. Or this particular God isn't real. But that's also what the people who wrote this would have believed at the time. That and that's just a little small area that gives a little insight that, oh yeah, these people didn't believe that plants were living. And that's not an odd thing, so I'm not pointing that out like, oh, look at those dummies. That's not an odd thing. Probably would have been a very common worldview at that time, but then that should easily be evidence that this then is not inspired by anything who has knowledge outside of the common worldview. This book so far does not delineate from any other books as far as its understanding of the world of that time. So yeah. Actually, what I'd expect from the Bible, if it was to be written by a being who knew things and was powerful and was not subject to the common worldview, we would expect it to have things in it that were not common to the worldview of that time. And if it was, kind of like a living book, as we like to it's the living word, it would also have things that are that would have been uncommon about things that we couldn't have been able to verify as true until recent times. It'd been stuff like that where you look at the Bible and say, "Holy crap, the Bible got this right," and wow, we're just now able to figure it out. And I like to remind people that for a long time, that is what science was. For a long time, science was doing its best to justify the Bible. Science was doing an absolute bang up job trying to demonstrate that the God of the Bible was accurate, and that the God of its religion is Islam was doing the same thing during its golden age. That at one point, science did all that it could to try to keep God relevant, and then realize, oh snap, it's not. And I only highlight that because there's this certain disingenuousness that believers often lobby at science as if the purpose of science was to get rid of God, when they forget that the very essence of science was looking for God in a very sense, or at least looking for the answers to the answers to the world around us, and that is an honorable pursuit, and it is that honorable pursuit that led to this honorable truth. Um, so anyway, back to the story. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and animals. And then you get this: be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Breed abundantly. Sure, why not? So like that. That's even like a weird thing. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Like like I don't know. Like I get it. I can see how the people of that time would have said this easily. Yeah, okay, yeah, breed abundantly. We need more people to help with the sheep and shit. But I could not see, how a God that is loving, and mind you, there's nothing in the scripture so far that has said anything about love. I don't know if y'all have noticed that, but we've gotten through 8 chapters of the first book of the Bible, and I don't think the word love has been mentioned one time, except for the fact that God loved, and I don't even know if the word loved was used there, but God liked Abel's offering more than he liked Cain's. That was it. But okay, so Noah went out with his sons and his wife and his sons with him, every animal, every crawling thing, and every bird, everything that moves on the earth. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every kind of clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. My question here was like, how did Noah know to do that? Why are we not explaining what an altar is? That was because early Christianity, it was like, the Bible is basic instructions before leaving Earth, and I'm like, so why isn't it doing a better job of leaving instructions? The Bible doesn't seem like it's actually trying to intentionally give instructions, not as a collective work. Now, when you get to you get to some of the prophets and you get to the epistles, sure, you find some things that are instructionary. But when you look at the Bible as a collective work, it doesn't really look like this is meant to give instructions. It seems more that this is meant to validate a worldview, or to validate an ideology. That's how I looked at it. And so, yeah, I would have wanted more information there. And then the Lord smelled the soothing aroma, and the Lord said to himself, I will never again curse the ground on the account of man, for the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth, and I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. this this is odd. I don't remember reading that way. The first thing that's really cool, and this is why I thought other people were weird, because when I read the Bible, and I guess because I've always kind of, I don't know how, but I did kind of have this sociological perspective that there had to be like an actual reason for sacrifices, like these blood sacrifices. And in the Bible, like they're all burnt. And so in my mind, it was like, oh, it's barbecue. You know what I'm saying? You just make a barbecue. And as a matter of fact, when we get to stuff like Leviticus and we kind of talk through some of those things, and even Nehemiah, you will very clearly see that without the superstitious presupposition, if you're reading the story as a rational person, you can clearly see that nobody's feeding God these sacrifices, that the sacrifices that the people make, and we're not in the temple period yet, but the sacrifices that people are making during the temple period are for the subsistence of the priest. And it's like, it seemed very odd to me that people didn't understand that. It's like, oh, God requires sacrifice. And it's like, well, no, this is actually more of a social system that if this social system doesn't work, then you don't have your priest. And contrary to the way Christianity has made things look, the priests of the Old Testament were not just out there reading a Bible, number one, because it didn't exist yet. The Tanakh didn't even exist yet. So the priest had actual socio-political functions, and the same system that is no different than what most organized societies still use today. Is simply a tax system, but it's a tax system that exists pre-currency, or at least pre-fiat currency, pre-currency. So yes, obviously a barbecue going on here, but the Lord will never again curse the ground on account of man. Like, okay, so you've been, because he has been cursing the ground a lot, right? For the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth. So from his young days, the intent of man's heart is evil. I did not understand that. To this day, I don't understand that unless you're talking about babies. I can see how babies can be evil sometimes, but other than that, like, no, I can't. I just can't buy into that. And but it's this thing, I will never again destroy every living thing as I've done. Well, okay, I guess that's specific, so I will leave that alone. Said I'm never going to destroy every living thing again. But this seems to be okay. All right, now it's bothering me grammatically because you didn't destroy every living thing this time either. Like, just to be clear, number one, you didn't destroy the plants. I've already made that clear. But then also, you didn't destroy Noah and his family, and you didn't destroy the other animals that you told Noah to save. So how do you think that you destroyed every living thing when you saved every? So, it's not even coherent. No wonder, like, you literally had to force people to become Christians at the sword because the Bible was not going to get it done. And I will make a small comment about 8:22. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest. Did not preach, like I said, I didn't preach from Noah a lot, but this scripture, oh, I did say a lot. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest will remain. Seed time and harvest will forever remain. Seed time and harvest will not cease while the earth, as long as the earth remains, which means if you sow your seed, and mind you, I was not a prosperity preacher. I do have thoughts on that, and we'll talk about it. But I was definitely not. As a matter of fact, I was afraid to preach about money because I didn't want to be considered a prosperity preacher. I didn't want anybody to think that I was after their money. I was actually one of those preachers who was willing to be absolutely poor if it meant that honored God. I was more obsessed with Pauline theology than I should have been. But it was just this idea that the processes that are in effect continue. So seed time and harvest will forever remain. So that got a lot of play out of me. I don't know why. It's just process. And I do like processes type stuff. All right. So we're going to wrap up with chapter 9. So then God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. He really loves to repeat himself. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every animal of the earth and on every bird of the sky and on everything that crawls on the ground and on all the fish of the sea. They are handed over to you. Now that is just like odd. Like, okay, so God says, okay, like man didn't do right this first time. They're really bad. They're evil from their youth, and this is problematic. And so we're gonna start over. And when we start over, I think I'm gonna make everybody afraid of you. What the fuck? Like, how are you getting these ideas? Where are you pulling this from? I'm sorry, I've been a little bit more loose with my language in this one. And that's because I hung out with some heathens this weekend. And you can blame them when that video drops. I'll say more later. All right, so the fear of you and the terror of you, let's skip that, or not skip it, we've already read it. Every morning that every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. You can eat everything. I have given everything to you. Like this, like not only like, dang, God is like still punishing the earth through Noah. He's like, all right, so I've wiped everything out and I'm really sorry about doing that. And I don't ever want to do that again. But let me tell you this, kill every fucking thing you want to. Eat whatever you want. Everything should be fucking terrified of you. This is God speaking. I just would like to remind everybody. But you shall not eat flesh with its life. That is its blood. I didn't understand that one as a kid. I still read you should not eat. Well, of course you drain the blood out. So I guess you saying don't eat it while the blood is still in there. And I'm like, okay. I certainly will require your lifeblood from every animal. I will require it. And from every person, from every man as his brother, I will require the life of a person. Whoever sheds human blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made mankind. As for you, be fruitful and multiply, populate the earth abundantly and multiply in it. I always like to remind people that in the image of man we made God kind. Yeah, yeah, it's a truth. It's a truism. As for you, be fruitful and multiply, populate the earth. He loves to repeat himself. Then God spoke to Noah and his sons with him. Now, behold, I myself am establishing my covenant with you and with your descendants after you. Like, why didn't Adam get a covenant? You know? Okay, so we're going. And with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every animal of the earth with you, of all that comes out of the ark, every animal of the earth, I establish my covenant with you, and all the flesh shall never again be eliminated by the waters of a flood, nor shall there again be a flood to destroy the earth. And I do like this because maybe this is why trees and plants have um, a much better life than all the other species. It's because they didn't get in on this covenant. I think the covenant screwed the rest of us. And God says, this is the sign of the covenant which I am making between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. Now, of course, I never bought this story again. I told you I did not believe these particular things were true. I felt these things were honorable misunderstandings, and I was sure that I was going to find other pastors who also thought that, and I was shocked to find that I did not. That was very disappointing to me, and again, that's when I finally realized, like, oh, I've been at the children's table this whole time. It's time to get up. Let me go get at the adult table and get me a game of spades in. So, yeah, and I didn't buy the idea of God putting a rainbow in the sky as a sign. To me, just the idea of making God active in a way that we could see in some areas was just jumping the shark. So you're saying no, you can look in the sky, you can say that God put that rainbow there as a sign to us. So now you're telling me that God can do something. And so then in all the cases of infant mortality, God has chosen not to do something. And so, again, that's why it was easier for me theologically to see that God is not an active agent in the earth, that God acts in the earth through humanity. Which you can see how that theology would, though, be a slippery slope to humanism and ultimately atheism. The more and more you separate yourself from the idea of an active God, because as you move away from the idea of a God with active agency, and a God who is dependent on the consciousness of, or the conscience rather, of humanity, then you begin to realize that you then are also just as dependent on the conscience of other humans. So that in the way that God, if it has no active agency, that it cannot actually guide the process of creating scripture. So then we have to literally just trust that this other person was listening to the right voice in their head. And I believe it was written in one of Paul's epistles that said there are many voices in this world and none without their significance, which a lot of charismatics have used to say there are many voices in your head and you gotta find the one that's the good one. Yeah, these people are not healthy. And I was such. I was such. That's why I can say it. I established my covenant with you in all flesh. The earth shall never again be eliminated by the waters of a flood, nor shall there again be a flood to destroy the earth. I feel like you just said the same thing twice. Okay. God said, "This is the sign of the covenant which I am making between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I've set my rainbow." Look at there, my rainbow. Wow. In the cloud, and it shall serve as a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. It shall come about when I make a cloud appear over the earth that the rainbow will be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. Like, this is like redundant as hell. And when the rainbow is in the cloud, then I will look at it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all the flesh that is on the earth. So God is talking about himself. This particular God is talking about himself in the first person, because he said, "I will look at it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living." That's weird. And God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant which I've established between me and all the flesh that." Like, why do you keep saying this, guy? So now the sons of Noah who came out the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham was the father of Canaan. Notice that immediately they go straight to Ham here, which kind of lets you know, okay, this story is about to be about Ham. These were the three sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. All right, so now we get, again, I said this was kind of a recreation event, and so we get here, and I think this is something we were all kind of introduced to, and I don't think this is lost on anybody who's been a Christian before, is that that Noah's story is supposed to be an explanation of the diversity of population, or yeah, the diversity of population, population diversity. So then Noah began farming, planted a vineyard. He drank some of the wine and became drunk and uncovered himself inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it on both of their shoulders and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their fathers. And their faces were turned away so that they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him. So he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants. He shall be to his brothers." He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." Noah lived 350 years after the flood, so all the days of Noah was 950 years, and he died. All right, so this story, again, this is obviously supposed to be an explanation for population diversity. There's a few things that I want to hit here, and then we'll close. I'm definitely at that time. Then we'll close, but we got through 3 chapters, so exciting. There's a few things here, right? So Noah has 3 sons, and then Noah he gets drunk. You know, I mean, it just says it. You know, he drank some of the wine. He became drunk, and notice God has no problem with Noah being drunk here. God does not intervene. And he and uncovered himself inside his tent, and this can have a lot of different meanings to it. But I want to focus on Ham a little bit here. And as a matter of fact, I might name this video "The Curse of Ham," since that's where we're ending up at. Even though it's actually not the curse of Ham, but that's how people remember it. But it's actually the curse of Canaan, and there's very specific reason for that. Now notice that there is no color distinguishing here. No color distinguishing here whatsoever. Now, we do get an idea of population diversity. However, what most people are failing to realize about the people who are telling this story is that, yes, while population diversity would have meant something different to them than what we know today because of growing globalism, right? So we're assuming that these people are trying to give an explanation for white people, Asian people, and African people. And I do want to highlight that that is not actually implicated in the text. And the reason I want to highlight that, and this goes back to a conversation that I got to have on Global Atheist earlier today, is that a lot of our racial underpinnings we give to the Bible. Now, does the Bible have some racial stuff going on? Absolutely. But this is not one of those places that I think is necessarily dealing with racial difference. Um, and that is because ultimately there is no racial difference during this time period between the people that will become Israel and the people that the people known as the Canaanites, which is the epitaph that kind of Canaan represents, obviously. And so this particular type of population diversity is dealing with an in-group diversity. It's the diversity of these same groups of people, these people who are related to each other. Now, it's the sociological things that we believe about the world at different times, at different time periods, that we as a species have gone back and, or as believers or whatnot, have gone back and imputed upon the text. But you will notice here, at least in the story of Ham, there is no indication of color. There is no indication of this being a different race. And so what that means is that for people to have attached themselves to that belief, that's what they wanted it to be. Which I often tell people, I remind people that religions did not make us superstitious. We gave our superstitions to religion. To believe that religions made us superstitious is to believe that we have no agency and we took no part into this. And it's, to me, that's a superstitious belief, because at that moment you believe that religion itself is an entity, that it is some type of deity that has active agency, as opposed to realizing that the things we've done in religion are excuses for our own behavior, and religion was just a safe excuse. But the more we remove ourselves from that superstition, then there are no more safe excuses. But so, he gets drunk. He gets drunk here. There is no color indication. We'll get to some more stories where there are some color indications, and even those color indications are not black and white the way we've tried to attach to them. But we'll get to that, because I don't want to go through all of that right now. But it's exciting to me. It's fascinating, especially when you consider the characters like Melchizedek, Zipporah, Jethro, the Queen of Sheba, Bathsheba. These are all people who can have attachments to Africa or darker skinned people, based off of their characters. But anyway, so let's the other thing I wanted to hit here is, what did Ham actually do wrong? And so I'm going to give you some fringe stuff, because as a kid, I was just like, I guess you're not supposed to cover somebody else up when they naked. No, he looked at him naked. He saw him naked, and he didn't cover him up. Now, oh my God. Okay, yes, yep, it's all coming back to me. Yeah. Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts about this, just like really at this moment. One is that preachers, we use this a lot, especially in churches that had the spiritual father movement and the spiritual son movements. I do know Bethel was like that, where man, I cannot remember his name right now. Bill Johnson, Chris Valentin, that crew, they believed in spiritual fathers and stuff like that. But then also a lot of the black churches, Bishop Jakes was considered a spiritual father to like Juanita Bynum, Paula White, Bishop Eddie Long. Bishop Eddie Long was considered a spiritual father to Paula White also somehow. And Ron Carpenter, who was in Greenville, South Carolina, is now in California. And so this idea was, they'd often use the story, this particular narrative, to talk about the importance of covering your spiritual father's weaknesses. So when you when your spiritual father is vulnerable, or you've seen them sin, or you've seen them do something that's wrong, if you were to go out and tell other people, you are dishonoring that spiritual father. And so you shouldn't do that. And, and you'd literally be treated like Canaan in those senses. There's a lot of spiritual abuse in those type of environments, because again, this stuff robs you of your own individual agency and your own sense of right and wrong. I think another way to look at this from a fringe point of perspective is that maybe Ham, maybe this story is metaphorical, in the sense that this is talking about a point in human history where somebody looked behind the curtain. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. It's like, don't look behind the curtain. And you got Ham that looked behind the curtain, and then he looked behind the curtain, and now his whole family is cursed forever, because they look behind the curtain. And whenever you see them, take their shit because they look behind the curtain, which is literally like how the rest of the Old Testament goes, is to take their stuff because they look behind the curtain. And so the good people, in order to honor that person, they're not going to look behind the curtain. But the whole idea of looking behind the curtain is a metaphor for truth. And so in this sense, again, because it's fan fiction, you can do with it what you want to do with it. And so in this sense, you could say that the thing that Ham actually gets cursed for is discovering the truth. That because this Noah character, in this sense, represents sort of a primordial figure, who is at the beginning of creation, and is or at the beginning of recreation, and is the one who is hearing the voices. He is the one who is hearing the instructions, who is saying this is what is happening. And so he is the Wizard of Oz in that sense. Noah is the Wizard of Oz, and it is very possible because, I'm considering people at this time. This probably wouldn't have been Ham's first time seeing his dad naked. They were on a boat for a long time, and so I don't think it was him going in, or I wouldn't think, let me say it that way, don't think is irrelevant because it's fan fiction, but I wouldn't have thought that this would have been him going in there being surprised that his dad was naked. I think this is a metaphor for him going in, seeing his father's vulnerabilities, and perhaps seeing that, oh, what this primordial figure said about life and the way life is not right. And then this character goes out to tell the other characters that no, there actually is nobody behind the curtain. This is all a lie, and these people are still so bought in that they'll come in and cover that up and pretend like, and not even try to see, oh, there's some good teaching in this right now, and not even try to see the truth, not even try to see, because basically Ham caught Noah slipping, right? Ham caught Noah when he was drunk, and it's like, and I know I'm skipping a lot here, or I'm throwing a lot at this, but any of you that are well versed in mythology and other and other cultures, you find stories just like this. It's a rationale that somebody got. Watch, here's that theme. It's that unearned access. Unearned access. And so in this case, Ham got this unearned access because Noah was slipping. Noah got drunk and let some secrets out. And then Ham went out and told Shem and Japheth, and was like, hey, bruh, dad been lying this whole time. And again, this relationship in mythology of father and son or father and child, mother and child, parent and child, is not literal, obviously, because the story's not literal, but it's typically generational, right? So this first generation after this primordial event gave us this story, this socio-political rationale of how to look at the world. And one group of people dissented from that because they disagreed with the authority of the generation before. Now, this is actually a common theme throughout all of Scripture. Even by the time Jesus comes along as a character, his character is in dissent from the common view at that time. And so anyway, so you can see that there as you can see the metaphor in that. But then also I mentioned Canaanites a lot because what you see here is more so than the curse of Ham, which doesn't exist, by the way. As far as from a biblical perspective, God doesn't curse Ham. The person, or Noah rather, doesn't curse Ham. The person who is cursed is Canaan. Because what this story is, in this sense, what we actually know it to be, is socio-political propaganda. This is, and it's written after the fact, so it's not like propaganda to get the people, to get the troops marched and say, hey, let's go do it. It's propaganda to say, no, this is why we did it. This is our whole story, you know. So it's almost like you're sitting down and you're getting ready to tell your story, and you're like, yeah, we're going to tell the people, you know, how we became a great nation. And it's like, well, what about that part where we killed everybody that was a part of this great nation and just took it from them? And it's like, oh yeah, if we're gonna tell that, we're probably gonna have to have a reason for why we did that. Why would we do this? Why would we treat these people in this type of way? This is what you're getting throughout all of the book of Genesis. Everything in the book of Genesis is a setup for the rationale of how how it is okay for the children of Israel to take Canaanite territory. That's what this setup is for. This is socio-political propaganda. So it is a justification written after the fact to say this is kind of our story. And again, I will give the original partakers of this story, not the characters, but the people who were telling these stories, I will give them more credit than most modern believers, as in, I don't believe any of them thought this was an accurate view of the world. I think they were writing in the same type of styles of that was common in the world around them. And I think that they understood that they were writing fables, but that those fables were going to be a part of their history because it represented information that they knew that they did not have access to. I would like to think that. Now, I could be being naive in that, but it is what it is. But yeah, so the curse of Ham does not exist. It's actually the curse of Canaan, and the curse of Canaan absolutely has nothing to do with race, whatsoever. I mean, now you can take the fan fiction and do with it what you want to do, but I think when you do that, you're missing the greater atrocity here, and that is all of the genocide and all of the land grabbing that ultimately takes place in the Bible. Its justification moment is right here. What is done to the Canaanites? The reason the Canaanites are evil is because they are they are the children of Ham. And Ham, what represents this person who, almost like Adam and Eve, got access to forbidden knowledge. You know, and again, that is a very common theme. And the curse here, because let's not miss an opportunity to show that this is an endorsement of slavery. The curse is slavery, which is what we do see. We do see the children of Israel take the Canaanites, take many of the Canaanites as slaves, you know, well, particularly the women. But yeah, so cursed be Canaan. This is a sociological justification of taking Canaanite territory, separating from the Canaanite people, because, and this again, anytime we're talking about, if we're talking about this and we want to be historically responsible, I think we have to include an understanding of Canaanite mythology, because this whole story, I mean, we're only in the 9th chapter and we're dealing with the curse of Canaan already. Because from a historical perspective, the the people that became known as the Israelites or the Hebrews, and I am definitely talking about the ancient group here. These ancient groups of people were at one point of time a part of this group of people who were also the Canaanites. And so this what you see in this journey from Genesis, even through the Gospels, from Genesis through the Gospels, is you just see a breaking away, and man, like literally, that's the story. Like Adam and Eve break away from the Garden of Eve. Cain and Abel break away from each other. Cain breaks away from the family, and it's just this breaking away. Noah breaks away from the rest of the world, creating a whole new world, and then you have these three brothers who break away from each other and populate the world, which is except for one of the children has to go serve, which basically means that the children of Shem and the children of Japheth now have the rational justification to go out and take from the children of Ham, their own brotherhood of men, from the children of Ham, as their servants, as their slaves. That's the justification there. Now, again, race is not mentioned here, but by the time you get to, I'd say, the 13 through the 1500s, now that people are learning that, oh snap, there's like spices and gold and metals and jewels in Africa, maybe we just now put them in that category too. And so then all of a sudden you start getting all of these implications, such as Ham and not Ham, sorry. There was something. Sheba, Nod, and all of these things. Now you get their placement in Africa, and now you do get people beginning to say, "Oh yeah, well this is Ham is the Africans," And so then it moves from being the curse of Canaan and the curse of Ham, because you can't call it the curse of Canaan, because by that time you had already established who the Canaanites were historically. So now you had to move this curse to another group of people. And that's something that you did not get from the text itself. It is something that you had to superimpose on the text. Now, I do encourage all of you, if you are interested, to do further research in this, because I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to share this other tab. I encourage you to check out the Wikipedia article on it. It's very, very interesting. There's a lot of interesting things here. And I'd also implore you to actually read some Jewish literature on this story, right? And figure out what some of the Jewish scholars think about this story. There are plenty of secular Jewish scholars who have thoughts on this story, just like there are plenty of secular Christian scholars. But for Jewish stories, I prefer that you go there. Start there to get a better understanding. And when I say that, not the Christian Jews. Don't do that. But yeah, because it's very fascinating. There are a lot of implications here, and then there are a lot of things in these stories that, from a Western or even an American context, English context, the language itself that's used here is not going to do it justice. And then there are things that represent other things that we don't know about. And I did want to address some of those things. However, I don't feel that I'd be the proper vehicle for that particular type of conversation. And so that's why I declined to address certain things about what the tent represents, and what nakedness represents to Jewish people at those times, because I'm really not grounded well enough in that. And that's a common mistake that preachers made. Preachers allowed themselves to speak for other culture groups without having an affinity or an acclamation with any of those cultural groups. And I don't want to do that. And as for anybody who says, well, why do you always speak on things about Christians and stuff like that? Because that's a group that I have a cultural affinity with, that I am culturally acclimated with. It's a part of my story. So it's something that I am grounded enough in to speak to. And then you can see clearly here, kind of like what I just said, the story's original purpose may have been to justify the biblical subjugation of the Canaanites to the Israelites, or a land claim to a portion of the new kingdom of Egypt, which ruled Canaan in the late Bronze Age. And now you see why Egypt, or how Egypt actually comes into the story. Why in the book of Exodus there has to be an Egypt. This because this whole story especially the whole story revolves around Canaanites in Canaan. In the later centuries, which is again something that I also said. So y'all see, I don't be making this stuff up. The narrative was interpreted by some Jews, Christians, and Muslims as an explanation for black skin, as well as a justification for enslavement of black people. So I want to show you that the worldwide, and that's the best way to say it. Well, not well, the global justification of the enslavement of black people came at the same time as the interpretation that this was a response, was a rationale or an explanation for black skin. That did not exist prior to, and I highlight that to again show that this is how dangerous it is when we allow superstition to persist, because then there's just no reason at all. Anybody can take anything and say it says anything they want it to say. And if other people are superstitious, they're going to say, well, that's good enough reason for me. And that's just horrible. And of course, as I just said, most Christians and Jews now disagree with such interpretations, because in the biblical text, Ham himself is not cursed, and neither race nor skin color are ever mentioned. And those are all things that I said. I did not know that was going to be there. But I do encourage you to check out this article. It was something else in here. Oh yeah, this is some of that stuff. This was the stuff that I wasn't going to get into, but hey, go check out Wikipedia. I don't ever want you to think that anything I'm saying up here is like hidden knowledge. None of this stuff is secrets, man. Anybody who's telling you like they have the hidden knowledge to anything is lying to you and is eventually going to ask you for money. I mean, well, we're all eventually going to ask you for money. But anyway, so you see some of that maternal incest and all of that. Curse of Canaan. There's something here that I wanted to highlight because I gave you some homework last week. But no, I'll let you check it out because we are at the end of our rope here. So I'll let you check that out on your own time. But I gave you homework last week, and that homework was to research Naama. And I did see, based also on my comments, that some of you actually did. Super duper proud of you for doing so. And because Naama is a very important character, because she is, according to some traditions, she is the wife of Noah. And according to other traditions, she is the wife of Ham. This is very, very, very interesting here. But also, for those of you, I am a big proponent for restoring interest in the Bible as fiction, because I think it has some really, really fantastically, freakishly great like story ideas. And when I say the Bible, that's actually not the right language. The way that I actually want to say is it's these stories that revolve around Canaanite mythology, any form of it. Like these stories are freaking awesome. Like there are some sects that believe that Noah was that his father was one of the Watchers, and things of that nature. So a lot of fun stuff in there, because of course before Noah is mentioned. Before we get Noah, we do get this, or before we get Noah's story, we do get this justification of that there is, or we get this introduction to the fact that the sons of God have come down and slept and made babies with the daughters of men, and so that it's held in some traditions that Noah could be one of these offspring, And again, it's all fan fiction, but it's fascinating when it's fiction. It's the moment when we try to take any of this and make this a true depiction of the reality of the world we live in, or even if you believed it was a true depiction, I could probably be okay with you as a person. But the moment you try to make this something that other people should have to live by, I consider that extremely dangerous. And of course, as I've said plenty of other times, disingenuous. This is just stories. These are just stories from people during these times, and that's why they look like stories from other people during these times. And in that way, they're fascinating. Is it a shame what people have done with these stories? Yes. But when people say the Bible says this or the Bible says anything, I like to remind them that the Bible doesn't say anything. It's a fucking book. And let's get back to treating it like a book. Thank you all for tuning in with me today. Of course, if you haven't done so already, make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel, share this with anybody who you think that this will be valuable for, and shoot, share it with a few people just to annoy them as well. Anything we can do to get the word out and to let people know that it is a liberating, progressive world out here, and we all can take part of it. I am down for. Also, if you want to support content like this and you want to be a part of our growing community, consider joining our Patreon. The link is in the description below. All right. Thank you for joining me for Bible study. I'll see you next time.